Hey, everybody, welcome to the TrailBlazers podcast. We're your hosts, Tyler and Dave. And on the TrailBlazers podcast, we're typically trying to highlight the journeys of, say, engineering or other professionals who have, say, taken an unconventional career path and now they're going and doing something different. And then, Tyler, over to you for the introduction for today's episode.
Right on. So today we got a really good one. We got Spencer Vandermeer, and he is on a really interesting place in his journey right now because he just recently left his job in technical sales at an engineering firm to pursue photography full time. So he got a mechanical engineering degree from the U of A, graduated in 2018, immediately started his own business in mechanical engineering, did that for a few years, and then moved on to technical sales, and then recently left that to go into photography. And he talks about the entire story, the ups, the downs, should you consider entrepreneurship? What are the pros? What are the cons? Finding a why, and kind of what you can expect. And he was an interesting guest to have because he speaks to it as it's really happening right now. We've had some other guests, and oftentimes you'll get advice from people that get to look back on the experience. And the farther you get away from the experience, maybe the details become a bit fuzzier, it gets told in a different way and stuff like that. But he's in it right now, taking some really interesting steps. And I really enjoyed this one. I don't know, Dave, what did you think?
Yeah, really liked it as well, Tyler. I took a couple of quotes that I just want to share regarding the episode that I think were really cool. So one thing that he talked about, like regarding immediately going into entrepreneurship straight out of his bachelor's degree, was he said basically the learning opportunity is extremely broad. So the quote that I took away from that was sacrificing a year of pay for a lot of broad learning. And I think he also mentioned this too, that it actually helped him identify more like what he wanted to do down the line, which I think is actually like a very valuable thing. Because sometimes, we're thinking right out of school, oh, I need to go get a job with like a nice name brand on my CV. And, I'm going to like work up this kind of career ladder. Whereas I think like having a little bit more time in that perspective of, say, going and doing something and learning a little bit more, that can be just as valuable sometimes. It can actually save you more time in the long run. And then just another quote that I liked as well, too. He was talking about finding more of like an overarching vision for your life as soon as you can. And that's the best, because then, say like we're going to find more passion with what we're doing and we're going to be more excited. But yeah, with that being said, we just want to give a quick shout out to a podcast that they're doing. It's called Crypt Talk. So just CRYP Talk. You can find it on Spotify. So he's doing that with another one of our guests previously on the show, Chris McNichol. So if any of you are interested in cryptocurrency, you can go look at that. And then two, as always, we'd really appreciate if you like the video and subscribe. It helps us get higher rankings on YouTube. And if you like,
smash the
like button. And yeah, it helps us get better rankings on YouTube. And we're always trying to bring, interesting stories and interesting perspectives, and it helps us, motivates us. So yeah, we'd really appreciate that. And without further ado, here's the episode. Yeah, I want to like pick your brain right now while it's like kind of fresh, and also, also applaud you for taking like, the chance and the opportunity of going and exploring like something different. And you want to kind of like give us a bit of a rundown of, say, like what your day to day looks like, and it's kind of like some of your ideas as a entrepreneur like these days?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate that. It is actually really, I've been surprised at the mental anguish of like changing so quickly, because ever since I graduated, as you guys may know, I started a company right when I graduated, and that's where I got this entrepreneurial spur. So I've known that I wanted to go back to that for a long time. So in some ways, it doesn't feel so new because of that. But on the other hand, I've only been doing photography since like April of last year, so I'm really fresh with that. And there's this interesting thing where it's almost like you can't fully learn something through an entrepreneurial and business scope until you just do that. Especially during COVID, like I shot with another photographer for the first time ever a few weekends ago, shooting a wedding. So the scope of experience that I had was really limited in some ways and really developed in other ways. So I've done my job, I guess, for about a month now. I had 2 weeks basically that we just left as some runway for me to hand off some projects. I was doing a technical sales job. So I had some accounts. There were ongoing things that we were supplying to customers. So just 2 weeks to take care of that. And before I quit, I was thinking those 2 weeks were going to be me, spending maybe a few hours a day handling some old work stuff, but really spending a lot of time planning my business and like getting right into things. I was going to be like editing photos every day, like putting stuff out, planning my business, going back in my business plan, restructuring it, reaching out to people, networking. And in reality, that's not what happened at all. I was like emotionally devastated. And that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone. It of course depends on the situation, but it was really, really hard to kind of feel like you're letting everyone down like that. You make a lot of relationships with coworkers, as you guys know, working in professional industries. Like sometimes you're working with people and they're really good friends of yours. So dealing with that on top of this whole, at the same time, I did just quit my job. Like I'm not making any money anymore. It's basically all me now. So all of these kind of compounding variables at the same time made it really difficult, to the point that I basically just had to really just chill out for like that whole time and kind of deal with things as they came up for work. And there were times that I would try to sit down and do some business planning and get ready for what was coming up, but it just didn't work. Maybe it's because photography is more of a creative pursuit than what I'm kind of used to with engineering or business development or sales. But it was in those 2 weeks I kind of learned that your mindset is more important than anything. And the whole reason that I quit my job was because I wanted to do something that I was really passionate about, and I wanted to enjoy my day-to-day working. And if I was just going to force myself to work, no matter what emotional turmoil I'm going through, or mental challenges or whatever, why did I quit my job then? Like, I'm not doing what I want to do at that point. So to go back to the question, it is really fresh. And my day-to-day now is different than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be going off of the previous plans that I'd put together and just grinding. It's actually a lot more calibrating. It's a lot more thinking about, what do I actually want this to be? And I just made a big change, and this is serious, and I need to make sure that I'm on the right track, because that's the whole point of this. So I've been spending more time writing. I even did like a blog and stuff like that. I'm planning on doing some more of that. And when it comes to photography and editing and making videos and things like that, I'm doing it when I want to and when I can enjoy it. And that's not going to be the case forever, because there's going to be a point in time where I just have to output. And that's something that I'm going to have to learn in the next few months, is how to balance those things. But yeah, to sum it up, I guess it's been a roller coaster is kind of what it's been, but I've been really happy and I haven't regretted the choice. It's just, it's a big change, really.
Yeah.
Above all else.
Yeah, and I would second Dave's sentiment that congratulations for doing this. This is so cool. Like, you're getting farther than like 95% of people, because most people think about this and never take like the step in that direction. So for you to actually take that action, win or learn, as Bill Chan, one of our other guests, would have said, you took the first step, and that's awesome. I always get like, that's the epitome of like betting on yourself and your ability to learn things and get into a new domain and everything like that. I get jealous when I see other people do this, because I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I kind of want to go back to maybe, how did you actually come to the decision that, okay, I am going to quit my job. I am going to pursue this full time, because I feel like so many people will teeter on the edge of that for years, for decades, for a lifetime, and never quite take that step. So is that something, like we were talking earlier, Chris McNichol, I think he's quite instantaneous when he does that, which is crazy to me. That was weird hearing his advice. Was it like that for you? Was it a slow burn? What was actually the day you woke up and like you were like, okay, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to quit my job and pursue something else?
Awesome question. And it's funny that you brought up Chris, because he's going to come up in this answer as well. I knew that I wanted to do something pretty early on. I knew I wanted to run some kind of small business at some point later in my career. I ended up getting this new job that was way more solid and rigid than anything I had really done before since graduating. So obviously I gave that a really good fair shake. Like for the first, at least kind of 8 months of doing that, this is what I'm doing now. That other stuff, we'll see. Maybe I won't ever do that. Maybe I will. And then of course COVID came along, and my day-to-day got a big shift, and I found myself working from home, kind of taking care of things and having some free time to work on other things here and there. And that's when I started doing photography. And from that point on, it kind of progressed from being like, okay, in like 5 or 6 years, I'm gonna know a lot about photography, and I'm gonna make the change. I'm gonna, live out this experience and then make the change. And then a few months later, I started saying, 2 or 3 years, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna change it up. I know that I've found something that I really like doing here, and I want to run a business, and this is gonna be the thing. Then it got to, I was saying like a year. I was thinking like, yeah, maybe next summer I'll do it. I can like move away to a place that I'll be able to build a bigger network, and COVID will hopefully be done with, and I can just do the thing that I want to do. And then I talked to Chris after he came back from Nicaraguan circus camp, and he convinced me to quit basically in one conversation I had with him. He basically walked me through his whole experience doing it as well. And it just gave me a bit of a unique shift on it, and made me realize a lot of the reason that I wasn't quitting was because of the anxiety of, letting people down. And I guess it's hard to break that mold, and you feel really bad about it. But he kind of walked me through his experiences, and that's kind of what took me from saying, all right, I'm going to do it in 6 months, to like, all right, I need to do this soon. And to make things harder, we're coming up on like the next kind of wave of this pandemic into the fall. So it's not a perfect time, but you kind of nailed it with most people never do it thing. And I think the reason that most people, or that some people will never do it, is because they're waiting for that perfect moment. And that's just not coming. Like there is no perfect moment to completely flip your life upside down. There isn't. And especially if you're going to do something in entrepreneurship, part of the game, no matter what, like it is intrinsic to entrepreneurship, is embracing that chaos, and that everything can just get flipped on its head in a second, and you have to be able to adapt to that. So I said, I kind of figured, I'm like, this is not a good time to just leave my job where I could, if everything shuts down again, I could still kind of have a paycheck and be working from home. This is not a good time to start a photography business where really I should be out networking, meeting people, shooting, traveling. Like that's a big one. I might not be able to do any of that, but in spite of all that, like, why would I not do it now? Because the first year is going to be chaos. It's going to be really uncomfortable. It's going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of times that I'm full of doubt and I'm questioning things. Why not just do that now? Like let's just go do that. Let's adapt to the world around us. That's what we have to do regardless. So maybe it's not the easiest time to adapt, but adaptation is adaptation, and the ability to learn that skill is the most important thing anyways. So that's kind of when I decided to pull the trigger, and I actually went on a vacation to Maui at the start of August, and just of course brought all the gear, down and I took like 5,000 pictures, like awesome trip. First time traveling with my camera, actually. And it just made me realize, like, hey, this is definitely what I want. I had a lot of time to reflect, did lots of reading, and all of these things kind of compounded at the same time. And I said, this is the time to do it. Like, when you're kind of mentally checked out of something, it's just a bad deal. Like, you gotta get out of there for everyone, for your employer, for yourself. It was kind of just at that point. So yeah, I kind of went out on a limb and stopped thinking about all the risks and just kind of did it. And and here we are about a month later.
Yeah. I mean, it's super exciting, right? And actually, I was just having a meal with a family member, and I was talking a little bit about who we were interviewing today for the podcast, right? And I mean, kind of looking for myself too, right? Like I'm the type of person is that like I just continually like execute basically on like the plan, right? And I think it is really difficult. Like one of the things I was talking with my mom about yesterday is just like like parents are getting a little bit older, like wanting to make sure like my parents stay, like stay in shape and stuff like that. And my mom always has kind of like ideas or things she wants to do, and she was talking about oh, I have this trampoline I want to build so I can like work on my flexibility, but I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet, right? And I just like asked my mom, I was like, what's kind of the impeding force for that? Like, what is it? And she's like, I want to do it, but I can't put it together. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, let me help you, just build that, right? So it's like, I kind of can see that kind of from, say, like the psychological perspective of that. Like, like you mentioned, like there's no perfect time, but it's just like if as long as we're willing to kind of like put in the work and grow a little bit, or like work towards like that uncertainty or those unknowns, like there's always going to be some type of like thing that we can learn. Like you mentioned, the adaptation, right? The adaptation, I think, is a skill that a lot of engineers are actually really good at, because especially say like where we went to school in Alberta, like the economy has shifted quite drastically over like this last 6-7 years, and then we've always had to adapt. And I think like especially for the young people to be mobile in like a changing economic landscape, like we have to be quite strong at that. Now, leading to adaptation and change, we did read your LinkedIn article online, which I really liked, and I think a lot in the article you were talking about change in particular. And I want to use one quote. My relationship with change will influence an outcome, and that feeling is incredibly liberating. So basically, like one thing that I'm curious about is like change is kind of a reality of life. Like we're always changing to some extent. And I think change does have some type of portion of risk to it too. So I'm wondering for yourself, Spencer, like, do you mind walking us through like how you balance a healthy relationship with change and risk and say like personal health?
Yeah, totally. And that's also a really good question. And change is an interesting one because there's kind of two types of changes, how I see it. There's the ones that you can't control. They just happen to you. COVID. Sometimes you just lose your job because of things you can't control. Sometimes you lose a loved one or a family member. These are all really big changes that you can't control. There's nothing you can do about them. And then there's the other type of change, which is you bring it upon yourself. So quitting your job, that's obviously the relevant one here. I think the way that you balance it, at least how I've been doing it so far since leaving, has been kind of taking it easy on myself. And when you're feeling the ebbs and flows of that, like the painful, kind of difficult to work through parts, you got to not personalize that with you as an individual. So if I don't feel like doing, like I quit my job to do photography and I don't feel like editing photos for 2 weeks, that's not because I don't like editing photos. That's because I'm not in a mental state to edit photos. So if you're making a big change like that, I guess keeping in touch with your own mental health and your mental state is the most important thing, and cutting yourself breaks. It's not a good time to approach everything with tough love and be really hard on yourself. It's definitely a time to take the change, work through it in healthy ways. So just going back to fundamental things like sleep well, like go see some friends, interact with people, and then wait for that to subside, because you got to just trust yourself that you made the change for the right reason, and then handle it for the challenge that it is, and don't let it creep into your identity or your passion for what that thing that you're going to pursue is. One of the things I really struggled with was like, why am I not instantly just going and putting my head right into this? And I thought, oh man, it just leads to a whole chain of anxiety and like self-doubt thoughts, right? Like, why did I do this if I won't even go do the work now? Is that me? Like, did I totally screw up? Maybe. But if you think about it like that, it's, first of all, it's not real. It's not realistic. And second of all, you're just going to end up in the same place you were before, where you quit doing something that you don't like because you've created this jaded perception of it. So balancing change on a day-to-day, I really think, is just acknowledging it for what it is, and then giving yourself space and time to work through it like any other challenge. You know, to tie it into engineering, even say you have like a really difficult assignment and you've got like this one question that you just can't finish. The solution to that is probably not going to be just stuffing everything you possibly can down your own throat to try to make stuff happen. It's probably going to be backing up a little bit, maybe reaching out to your network and approaching it from a problem solving angle. So why wouldn't you do the same thing with something that's just a little bit more psychologically impacting? I guess it's more of a internal struggle than an external task, but I think the same methodology applies to handling it.
Yeah, I'd say that's some really good advice for handling change in your life. And I mean, we know the universe kind of likes its equilibrium, and it is a roller coaster. And anybody that's thinking about like making a big change or going into entrepreneurship, you got to be aware that there are those lows because it's a roller coaster, but there's also those highs. I know anytime I've made a huge change in my life, for every low that there was a high that was just as high, and that kind of keeps you going through and saying more and more lows are worth it. So I'm kind of interested from you, Spencer, in this first month and during this transition. Yeah, you've experienced some anxiety and maybe some negative self-talk at points, and you've tried to balance that out with being kind to yourself. What have been some of the highs on the roller coaster since you've started this photography endeavor?
Yeah, so some of the highs actually have just been, I guess, balancing. As I start to kind of mentally balance out to where I was before, I'm realizing it was a good decision, and I'm really enjoying my day-to-day life right now. Just working on things, posting, sharing my thoughts. I'm trying to be pretty vulnerable through the process, because kind of along the same lines of you guys doing this podcast, I think the landscape of careers is changing in a big way, and I'm going through this. It seems like it'd be kind of a waste to not share some of my experiences. So actually, one of the really big high points for me has been reconnecting with that sense of entrepreneurship and wanting other people to feel free to do the same. You know, whether that's starting a business or even just changing industries. I'm really finding a lot of satisfaction living and working in this community of people that are thinking this way. So yeah, honestly, even just like being on the podcast right now, this is something that's really exciting for me. I love this. This makes me feel very fulfilled compared to kind of what I was doing before. And then of course I have had some successes in photography and stuff like that too. Like, I've been putting together some plans that are working. I'm growing my online network, because ideally I'd like to kind of have it all run itself and be digitally based, so that I can just be traveling all the time, taking pictures. That would be the dream. So things are kind of starting to come to fruition a little bit. Of course, it's still very early on, but I've been receiving a lot of support, and as that mindset continues to adapt and, you know, even go beyond where I thought it might be or where it could be, that's incredibly exciting. And every day that's kind of more and more worth it. the anxiety and stress of the change slows down, goes away a little bit as this new world of opportunity creeps in. So yeah, it's super exciting. And I think it's similar to really any kind of career change. I don't think it's exclusive to entrepreneurship. I think it's just, there's always that positive side, just like you said, Tyler. At the end of the day, there's always that positive outlook, and the highs become bigger than the lows. And yeah, eventually you're doing what you wanted to do. You're fulfilling the decision you made in the first place. So it's coming along. It's coming along more quickly than I thought it would, based on how the first 2 weeks felt. Yeah, and just working with more people too. Like that's the other thing when you make a big change, you enter this whole new network of people. And that's not to say that the people you were working with before weren't great or you didn't love them, but meeting new people and seeing these new perspectives is just, it's a never ending circuit of learning and excitement. So yeah, it's just, those have been the most positive aspects so far. I'm sure if you were to ask me that in a few months, I would have a whole different answer that would probably be more photography related. But for the time being, that honestly is those are the kind of things that have been like standing out to me, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think even, kind of maybe I can sort of touch on the side perspective that I thought too. Like you were just mentioning that, like when you're going into a new opportunity, like a career change or say like something along those lines, is oftentimes you have like this new network or these new groups of people that you're connecting with, right? And like the perspectives are so fresh. Like from my side, when I was doing entrepreneurship at the end of 2019 and for all like, 2020 basically, is I was surrounded by entrepreneurs. So it's like where, for example, like I wasn't kind of surrounded with say, people who might not like understand exactly like the transition, like you're mentioning, Spencer, like, oh, like I feel because like to some extent, like it might feel like we're letting people down, but then like you go and find this kind of like supportive, like-minded network of people who all are like wanting to reach out and help you grow and be like, no, actually, like you're making the right choice. Like, you're working on this. And then, you have all these like really fresh perspectives that I think are really encouraging. And one thing, I've heard you mention probably already a couple times is like you did start out pretty much right out of university, I believe, kind of working on your own venture, like your own entrepreneurship venture, which I think, based on what I've seen, is kind of becoming more popular, which I think is great, right? Because I mean, like the earlier you get started in your career, kind of like starting on entrepreneurship, whether it goes good or whether it goes bad, you're learning a lot, right? Because basically you have to like, pilot this ship by yourself or with a small team. We're saying like a larger corporate, you do get like the opportunity to learn from more senior members on your team, but it's maybe not the same type of growth trajectory. So one thing that I'm actually curious on is say like, cause you did start out kind of right away from on the entrepreneurship side. Do you mind talking a little bit to maybe say like prospective students or like young professionals who are curious about entrepreneurship and just like maybe highlighting a bit of some of the pros that you saw of like right off the bat doing this from your bachelor's degree? And then maybe also, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the cons that you thought during like that time too. That'd be great.
Yeah. So starting a company right out of university, I think it was a fairly unconventional way to do things when I did it. So I did it in 2018. And the why, as to why I did that, I think really boils down to, I saw a lot of other people that were interested in going and getting jobs, and they're just applying for stuff like that last semester at school. People are just sitting at their table typing away, like writing cover letters, sending their resumes off to all these places. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. And I don't know why. I just know that I don't want to do that. So that's kind of when I made the decision to just do what I wanted to do, which at the time just kind of felt like a lazy cop out. But in hindsight, it worked out really well for me because I think I'm in a better place now than I would have been. Now, the pros and cons of doing that. I am a very pro advocate for doing this because it has worked out well for me. That being said, there's a few things to look out for. Like, you're basically sacrificing a year of pay for a lot of broad learning, which for me was fantastic because I didn't have a great perception of what I wanted to do. I didn't know what industry I wanted to work in. To be honest with you, my whole university experience, I think I kind of dropped the ball on. I was not involved with enough. I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't thinking the way that I need to be thinking to have like a satisfying career. So I was in a place that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I was also able to support myself for a period of time without making a lot of money. So given those two facts, it was an excellent decision. And anyone else in the same position that has any interest whatsoever in running a business or being an entrepreneur, I would say 100% do it. It will be the best thing that you do. And take it slowly. Don't worry too much about the business itself. Worry about learning about business, because those are the skills that you can combine with that engineering knowledge you have. And that's when you realize you can do whatever you want to do. Depending on how much money you want to make or whatever, that's going to be a shift on the scale between business and passion. But I think engineering teaches you, above all else, that when you have an extremely difficult problem in front of you, you know that you can solve it. You can face that and conquer it. 100%. You can. You have people around you that can help. You have skills yourself. And that kind of unbeatable mindset is a certain differentiator between people that have an engineering background and maybe some people that don't. So you combine that with some business know-how and just some, logistical knowledge, like, for example, how do you use a minimum viable product to just start something off small and repeatedly iterate to create something that, number one, you're passionate about and you care about, but number two, for the commercial side, it adds value to society and people will pay for it. It's a business, right? So engineering is kind of that unbeatable mindset, and business and entrepreneurship is a gateway to living off of your passions, making money doing what you want to do. So you combine those two things and you realize there's a whole world of opportunity here. So you can take someone who has no idea what they want to do. They might have gone through their entire degree having not for 1 second thought about, what industry do I want to work in? Like what I did. Like I had no idea. It's ridiculous when I look back on it now. I'm like, dude, what were you even doing there? Like you thought about nothing the whole time. Like maybe I shouldn't have been watching hockey with Tyler in Calc, But you take that and then you turn it into this whole world of opportunity just by starting a business instead of getting a job. So those are the pros. The cons are it's a little uncomfortable for sure. You have to be ready to put yourself out there. Get embarrassed at times, get rejected. Understand that business embarrassment and rejection shouldn't reflect on you as a person, rather your business. And while those two things are very closely intertwined, there is a difference there. Yourself and who you are is no one else gets to say anything about that, but your business should be a reflection of what you want to do and who you want to do it for. So really that whole idea of putting yourself out there and dealing with some of that rejection is something you have to be ready for. And there's times like losing your first client when you think you're going to make money for the first time with your business and then it falls through. Like, yeah, that sucks. And that's the kind of stuff that you got to be ready to deal with. So I guess above all else, going back to the mindset thing, in that situation, if your mindset is to learn and to really gain some new experiences and figure out what you like to do, it's a great opportunity to do that. In terms of day-to-day work, I got to try out doing detailed design engineering, business development, operations. You even touch on like bookkeeping and stuff like that. Like you'll see everything, branding, marketing, all this stuff. You get to experience for yourself doing something that you care about. So you're just learning at an unbelievable rate. You even budget a few hours a day to just read. You never stop learning. It feels like it's not even fair how much you're learning. It's crazy. Just by kind of putting yourself in that space. So yeah, you get to figure out what you want to do on a day-to-day. You're going to get a lot of exposure to different industries, figure out which ones you might be interested in, which ones you might not really want much to do with. It's an incredible way to calibrate yourself. And one perception that seems to come across a lot is like, you left engineering to do this, or you left whatever you're doing before to do this new thing. And that hasn't been my experience. It hasn't felt like that. It feels like you still use that. Whatever it is you get in engineering, I think it's a really good problem solving mindset, an ability to work hard when you need to, work with people, and ultimately just know that you can do anything. That's something that is independent of the engineering career. You can apply that to any pursuit that you ever go through in life. You can apply that same way of thinking that you learn from school. And it's a skill set. And there's no reason you can't go learn other skills. And then when you make a business and become an entrepreneur, it's not about leaving out things or leaving things behind. It's about taking everything you have and mixing it together and then making something that people want out of that. And it's incredibly fulfilling, I think.
Yeah, those are really good points. And I like how you touched on kind of the things that you can transfer from the engineering domain to like a domain that you're in right now, like photography. There's a lot of skills that are very fundamental that will help you. And then you can kind of draw that analogy if you want, like, okay, this is hard, but also my assignments were hard. My exams were hard. And how did I tackle those? Well, I was analytical. I, learned how to, how do I learn the best way, and how can I build this appropriate skill set for this task? And so there's a lot of things that you can carry over that you spoke about. Have there been some specific things from the engineering domain that you brought over to photography that maybe gives you a bit of a competitive edge, you think? Or are there any like other transferable skills that you would think of right off the bat?
Yeah, definitely. Even just to name some like really base level things, I love Excel. You guys probably love Excel too, but like anytime I'm having a problem with anything, it's like, hey, how can we make this into a spreadsheet? There's a way. There's definitely a way, and then it's all there. I don't have to think about it anymore. I just put some numbers in, and it'll do it. So yeah, something like Excel. I have a 3D printer here that I use for basically like I dropped a lens hood from one of my lenses into this river in the mountains a few months ago, and they're like pretty expensive to buy new ones. So it's like, okay, you can go online and find a model for a new one and just print it. Like, so stuff like that normally someone wouldn't necessarily venture out to explore if they're really just in the photography realm. It's just, I've done it before, I guess, and it's not a big challenge to apply it to this. I think those would be the major ones, but it's also worth noting that the engineering mindset is a big part of why I got into photography. The technical aspects of cameras and the technology and learning about the different aspects of lenses and sensors and different body types, like that stuff. Before I bought my camera, I spent weeks just researching that because it was so interesting. And that's worth mentioning too, I think, because that interest comes from somewhere, and it comes from a background of knowledge around stuff and a curiosity that actually serves as a big motivation for doing photography. So honestly, yeah, like there's a lot of ways that it kind of comes into what I'm doing now, even though by no stretch of the imagination would I ever be able to call myself like an engineer right now. I'm still kind of thinking like an engineer in the ways that it seems appropriate.
Yeah. I think, from kind of like the way that I see it too, is that, and I think you mentioned this already too, it's just like kind of the way that you're trained or educated, right? Like you always have like some way of like looking at problems or like finding ways to kind of like pull things from your background to what you're currently doing right now. And I think, Tyler, you'd be a good example of this too, right? Like, you probably aren't using all the classes that you took during your mechanical engineering degree, right? But say some of the more fundamental things that you learned, like say like your work ethic and your discipline and your routine and your time management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like you have the ability to kind of, take from your school days or your internship days and then apply to like what you're working on right now. And then I think like one thing I'm curious on too, Spencer, is because like you kind of have identified a bit of like it sounds like a great passion, for photography. Plus, like with a business opportunity and entrepreneurship, and I know you're also like you have it sounds like a couple other side projects on the side too. So like you definitely have your kind of hands full on like a bunch of things that's providing you a lot of passion, right? And like one thing that we're always curious on is say like, do you have any advice for students or say like young professionals who are kind of in the process of like finding their why or like finding like that passion for doing what they want to do? Like, I mean, it sounds like, even through your work and like your conversation, even with say like Chris, these kind of helped you probably like, narrow into like this passion and like really drive you to like where you are now. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts that could say like, bring that same kind of like passion or kind of like extrapolating of thoughts to say younger professionals and students.
Yeah, totally. And this is a tough one to answer. Again, it's a good question, but it's hard to answer because I know what it's like to be in that student mindset, and it feels like, especially in like engineering school, it feels as though you don't have time to think about anything except school. So it's very easy to push the thoughts of like, is this what I want to do, or is this what I should be doing aside? And it's even harder to think about why you're doing it, you know? And sometimes those get reversed. Sometimes people just do something, and so they're saying, this is what I'm doing. And then they try to think about why they're doing it after the fact. And I think that is not the mentality. I don't think that's a good mentality at all, but that's something that's kind of naturally pushed upon people sometimes in one way or another. I decided to go into engineering when I was like 16. I didn't know anything. Like, I was an idiot. I was in high school, and I decided I wanted to go do engineering, right? I figured, yeah, I like doing math and science. Let's do it. And that's fine. It's okay that I decided to do something, but as long as, you can't let that be the be all and end all of your career. And then for the rest of your life, just try to justify that choice. So people that are in school right now or in engineering right now, and they're looking for that why, I would say try as hard as you can to separate why you're doing it with what people think about you, if that makes any sense. Just speaking from personal experience, like it early on, before I was really exposed to different ways of thinking, a lot of what I did was motivated by what other people would think, or just pressures, or like, I should go into engineering because it would give me a good career and people are going to respect me if I have a good career. If you can somehow, some way or another, and it's easy for me to sit here and say this now, and I wasn't able to do it when I was in school, but maybe some people who are listening can. If you can separate that thought with, there's going to come a point in time where you actually do know what you want to do. You figure out enough about yourself that you know what it is you want to spend your time on, and what you want to accomplish with your career, which is one thing you should definitely be thinking about early on. And it's easy to push that away. Like, what do you want to have done with your career when you're laying on your deathbed and it's all said and done? Did you want to be, working a job because the pay was good and because people thought you were awesome? Or do you want to just have some project, something that you accomplished that you did and that wouldn't have happened if you weren't on planet Earth? If you can think of that thing and somehow be mindful of that, and then let that ultimate goal influence your day-to-day decision making, that's a good way to at least get on the right track, I think. Mm-hmm. Again, it's hard to do that, but I would just really encourage people to take some really intentional time and think and write about what it is they want to accomplish with their career, because that makes those decisions a lot easier. And there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of really good distractions to take you away from your own interests. And it's really easy to take the conventional route and do what society wants you to do, because it just makes so much sense from a financial level, from like a lifestyle point of view even. So it's very challenging to to see those distractions and choose otherwise. And I think in order to do that, you need a vision of what you want for your life. There's this actually really good book on this. It's called there's two books. There's one called the E-Myth, and then there's a second version of it called the E-Myth Manager. And basically what it does is it breaks down the different roles within a company or a small business. So there's someone they call them the technician. They just like working. There's someone who likes operating things. I don't remember what they call them. And then there's this other person called the emperor. And the emperor has this grand view, this grand vision for what the company is supposed to do. They oversee everything. Maybe they're not the hardest workers when it comes down to it, but they've got this overview of things, this emperor vision. And I think finding that emperor vision for your life as soon as you possibly can is the best thing that you can do for yourself. And that emperor vision doesn't have to do with what you're learning as a skill set. It has to do with what you want to accomplish, and everything you learn along the way supplements that. So if you're sitting in engineering school right now and you think, what am I doing here? This is a lot of work. I have no plan. I would honestly say stick with it, because you're learning really, really valuable skills. And I didn't go a conventional engineering route, but I would still tell people to go into engineering if they were thinking about it. But you need to be very diligent in thinking about that grand vision of your life and what you want to accomplish. Because then instead of looking at engineering school as this depressing thing that you feel like you're wasting your time, you see it for what it really is, which is an incredible tool for accomplishing whatever it is you might want to do. And so I'm not saying it's easy to adopt that mindset, and hindsight's 2020. So take it for what it's worth. But that's, if I could poke anyone in a direction, it would be that.
Would definitely agree on everything you said there. And I like the point that you hit on at the end, is that, and I really agree with it, is that you should view the engineering degree as a tool rather than like who you are. Because for me, I believe it's like an identity thing. And I think a lot of time people get it wrong, and they think that I am like a mechanical engineer, and therefore I'll go do mechanical engineering jobs, or I am a chemical engineer, therefore I should go and do chemical engineering jobs. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think you should think you have an identity as just as you as a person, as me, Tyler, Spencer, Dave. And it's just like, what do I care about? What do I like? And then how can I use the engineering degree as a tool to act as a force multiplier to impact that problem or have an effect in that area? And I think that's kind of along the same lines as what you were saying. And I think that, that's the way I would look at it. And the easiest way to think about it is that you can know what you want to do with your engineering degree before you even step foot in the school in first year, because you should have something maybe you care about. And then it's like, I want an engineering degree for that. But yeah, that's kind of how I like to think about it too. But no, that was really, really good advice, Spencer. And I think with that, that's the perfect spot for us to wrap up. So I'll say thank you. You gave a lot of good advice today. Thank you for sharing your story, especially as you're in the midst of a really incredible change right now. I'm watching very intently. I think it's awesome. I love that you're doing it. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing all of your experience so far and kind of where you might be going in the future.
Yeah, and I just will jump into, and I just want to say thank you as well, Spencer. Completely agree with Tyler too. I mean, like with pretty much all our guests on the show, we could probably just talk for like ever and ever and ever. I think we have like a lot more questions we want to ask you too. But yeah, and definitely Drew, we're on the show just giving you encouragement. Like we appreciate like taking the risk and finding kind of like that nice passion point plus this entrepreneurial space. So yeah, we're kind of quite excited to see how the next months are going to transpire, and hopefully we can pick your brain down this journey as well again, maybe one more time, and ask your perspectives a little bit more from a few months down the road. But yeah, thanks again.
Totally.
Okay, everybody. So that was Spencer. We hope you enjoyed the episode. You can tell he's extremely introspective on the experience he's going through right now. And he was able to extract a lot of good advice and thoughts and kind of give a really clear picture onto what that experience is like of leaving your job and going full-time into entrepreneurship in a field where, he hasn't built that much experience yet. He's still learning quite a bit. I think it's awesome Kind of like I mentioned during the interview, I get a little bit jealous when I see people do this, because this is like just betting on yourself. And I love that he's doing it, taking that chance, especially at a young age. I think one of the things that I enjoyed the most about when he was talking was in entrepreneurship. The first time that he did it is he said that, you have to embrace the chaos. And so I think that maybe prepared him a little bit more for what he's going through right now, because he had that experience once right out of university. And he was saying that, you're going to flip your life upside down, and it's going to be nuts, and you just got to kind of roll with it and embrace the chaos. I thought that was really good advice. So if you're someone that, maybe that's not your forte, or, that's something you don't want to experience, that might be a con of entrepreneurship for sure. But if you're somebody that thrives in that situation, definitely give it a try. We've heard a few other guests advocate for that as well, if you enjoy that sort of thing. So no, lots of good wisdom in there. Dave, what are your thoughts after that one?
Yeah, Tyler kind of had a nice way of putting it, like a lot of introspective thinking. It sounds like Spencer also spends quite a bit of time probably reflecting on his thoughts and his decisions as well too, which I think is, a really healthy learning process for a lot of us, whether we're young professionals, students, just kind of like actually breaking down at some point, breaking down like what's going on in the world, or say like the job, or like our current situation. This can kind of help us get to a better outcome of, say, getting further understanding of what we're actually passionate about and what we want to do. Something that I thought was really good as well too was the perspectives that Spencer had, like in regards to, say, trying to do entrepreneurship, basically, rather than thinking about it. So for him, what he was talking about is just essentially going and doing it. And I think it's a really healthy way of looking at, say, how we want to tackle different problems in our lives. Because, even for myself, like I can say, for example, I had this conversation with my mom yesterday too. I know based on my job, like I'm a software developer, like I should be stretching more often because I'm not working on a computer desk, 8-9 hours a day, basically every day of the week, right? And all I know is I just need to stretch for like 5 to 10 minutes a day. It's actually not that hard of a task, but sometimes it's just like getting that habit built, or like that mental stamina to go and do it is difficult, right? And so I think, this perspective doesn't even have to be just applied in entrepreneurship and like going and making like a really big change at one particular point in time. It can just be like small changes in our lives. Like, I'm going to study French 20 minutes a day, every day of the week, right before I go to bed. I don't know if you actually do that, but like, I'm just saying 20 minutes a day, every day of the week, right before I go to bed. And like, you do that for 3 straight weeks. And like, that habit's really hard to break. And then you do that habit for like a really long time, and that habit's really hard to break. And so I think it's just like a very healthy perspective of how we can look at some of these larger decisions. And it doesn't have to start from such anything, as crazy as like, okay, once again, not crazy, but like just I'm quitting my job, I'm going to entrepreneurship. We can always start smaller and like build up to that. But I encourage any of our listeners, maybe it could just be like something small in your day. Like, maybe, you can comment about something you want to change, or like a habit you want to build, and like work on it for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then tell us what the outcome is. We'd be happy to see what that is too. So yeah, Tyler, any more thoughts on the podcast, or what do you think?
No, I think you summed it up nicely there. I like the point you were making. I think with anything like that, when you start doing a habit and stuff like that, you just get to over time see the value of consistency. And so even if it's a little small step, you kind of see what big impact that plays. And then you can do that in other areas of your life and take bigger steps towards other things. And like you're mentioning the French thing for me, for example, I practice that every day. It's like one of the first things I do when I get up in the morning. And, some days it feels like I learned nothing, or I couldn't find my words or stuff like that. But the consistency over a course of years is like I can hold a conversation now in French. And so I see that there. Same thing with like us working on the podcast. You know that we work out on this a little bit like every day, it seems like. And we've gone from at the start of the year with just an idea, and now we have a bunch of episodes out. So it makes me excited to put that into other areas of my life as well. Just that consistency of habit. And I think that Spencer's going to be good with that as well. He seems to have a similar sort of sentiment along those same lines. So no, I thought it was really well done. It's a good episode for students that are looking for, how they develop a why, because he has some regrets about, how he spent some of his time in university and kind of his experiences afterwards to lead him to his why now. And also, he's right in the middle of the transition. So I thought it was really great. That's kind of all I have to say about it. And we hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you like and subscribe. And shout out to the Cryptop podcast. Make sure you check them out as well if you need to learn more about cryptocurrency. So with that, we hope you guys have a good one, and we'll catch you on the next episode.